Hello dear students, I am Samir Velankar. I welcome all of you to this video this is the fourth video on functions in C, and in this video we are going to learn about definition and declaration of functions. This is a very important concept as far as defining the functions are concerned. So just make sure that you understand every aspect of it. Now, to explain what is definition and declaration of function, I have defined a very simple function. I just don't want to go in the complications of function body itself and what function does. So I have written a very simple function here called reciprocal. That's the name of the function, reciprocal, and it takes one float parameter, float x. What it does is that if we pass some value, let's say float x we pass is 2.0, that is 2 obviously, then the function will return 1 upon 2.0. See what is it returning? Reciprocal of x, reciprocal of the float which is passed to the function. So 1 upon 2.0, obviously 0.5 will be returned back to the calling function, that is main. It is not difficult to see that the reciprocal function must return a float, because 1 upon a float, 1 upon 2.0 is going to be 0.5, and 0.5 is a floating point number. So we have written a very simple function, find reciprocal of a floating point number x. That's why we are returning 1 upon x. Now let's see main. Main is having two variables a and b, both of type floats, and we ask the user to enter a float from the keyboard. Suppose user enters the value of the float a as 2.0, then you all know from the earlier videos that this is the function call. So we are calling reciprocal and we are passing a, value of a. Value of a is 2.0. That's the value we are passing. This value 2.0 goes in x, and the function returns 1 upon 2.0, 1 upon 2.0, which is 0.5, and 0.5 will be returned at the call. At the call here 0.5, and b will become 0.5, and finally we print reciprocal. Okay, fine. This is not the area of our discussion. The discussion is about definition and declaration of function. Now just check, and to understand definition and declaration of function, just imagine that instead of writing this function float reciprocal float x before main, what we have done till now, whatever examples we saw, being this is the fourth video, in the previous three videos and this one, we have written the function above main. I'm sure this question must have creeped in your mind that what if we write this function, entire function, reciprocal float x, this is the function, correct, below the main. So it returns 1 upon x and the function ends. So I have removed the function from here and I have written this function below the main. Instead of saying below main, yeah, of course I have written it below main, no doubt about it. Below this close brace I have written. But instead of saying we have written the function below main, let's say we have written the function below the call. Check that call is at this line, isn't it? Reciprocal is getting called. This is the function call, and function call is at this line where I am pointing, but the function itself has been written below this call. Okay, so what happens now? Just see that this program is wrong and this will give an error. Strange, isn't it? That means you have to write the reciprocal function above main. Why does this happen? And the error, by the way, is reported at this line, at the call, and the error is function reciprocal not found. Actually, this is not the error. Exact words are function reciprocal must have prototype. Don't worry, I'll tell you what prototype is, but I have written the same error in just readable words. So you can understand that what C is complaining is there is no function called reciprocal in this program. But I have defined reciprocal function. Yes, I have written it. Then why is C language complaining that reciprocal function is not found really? The point is that if you write the function below the call, check the call is over here, and you have written it below the call, then you have to define the function above the call. So here comes the two words, definition and declaration. What do you mean by definition is when you write entire function starting with what it returns, what is its name, what are the parameters, and the body of the function. Check this. This is the entire function that we have written here. Check this. We have written not only the header, the first line, but we have written what is the content of the function. When we write this entire function, we say that we have defined the function. Come again. Where do you see definition of reciprocal now? On this clean slate, where do you find the definition of reciprocal function? Yes, exactly. This entire thing is called definition. Why is it known as definition? Because we have not only written name, parameter, and return type, but we have also mentioned what it does, what are the contents of the function, what is the body of the function, what is the code of the function. So in short, when we write the entire function, it is known as function definition. And how do you define a function? Function is defined by writing return type, then function name, then parameter, no semicolon, remember no semicolon here, and then brace open, then the body of the function, one or more lines, and then end. This is known as function definition. Okay. So what is function declaration then? The other word over here that we are learning. Function declaration. Now let's say we write only first line of the function. That is, we write float, reciprocal, float, x, and after this line we give semicolon, and what we don't write after this is brace open and the contents of the function. We don't write this entire part. That means we are not defining what function does. We have not at all said that, but we have only said that there is some function called reciprocal which takes a float parameter and it returns a float, and we have literally finished this with semicolon at this point of time. So this kind of line is known as function declaration. So what is function declaration? When you write return type, function name, parameter, followed by semicolon, this is followed by semicolon, but you don't write the contents of the function, you don't write the body of the function, then it is known as function declaration. Coming back to our earlier discussion, is that if suppose I don't write this function float above main, but I write this below main here, float, reciprocal, and the function. To save some time, just imagine this entire function has been written here. I am not producing it again over here. You know that this is going to give error at this point. At this line, it is going to give error, and the error is function not found. So why this is happening is because when you define, isn't it? This is definition of the function. When you define the function below the call, then C language complains that the function is not found and you have to define the function above the call. But what if we don't want to define the function above the call? Somebody is very rigid and somebody says, no, 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 I won't write the function above the call, but I will write it below the call. Okay, fine. If you want to do that, then you will have to write the first line of the function above this. That is float reciprocal, float x, and end this line with semicolon. What you are now doing is you are declaring a function. You are declaring a function and you are telling C that hello, there is a function reciprocal somewhere in the program which has a float parameter and which returns a float. So this line takes care of this error, and C now knows that okay, there is a reciprocal function. If it is not located above main, it must be located below main, and it will run this function now. Coming back to definitions and declaration again, just repeat this. Just repeat as I am going ahead. Writing, writing entire function, writing entire function is called function definition. definition, and writing only the first line. What do you mean by the first line? First line is return type, name, and parameter. This first line, writing only the first line ending with semicolon, ending with semicolon is called function declaration. Function declaration. Now, when do you declare a function? You have to declare a function if you write some function, if you define the function below the call. If you define this function below the call, then program won't work. If you want the program to work, you just have to declare the function above main. And how do you declare the function? Just take this first line and paste it above main and end it with semicolon. Let's see this program in action. Let's say that I have a program here. Yeah, the same program, reciprocal float x. And look, I have defined the function above the call, isn't it? The entire function has been written here. Where? Above this call. This is the call, reciprocal a. Check this line. This is the call to the function. So there won't be any trouble if I run this code. Obviously, this code will run because the entire function is defined above the call. So at the beginning, when the program runs, it is going to ask me to enter a float value. Suppose I enter 2, then the output surely is going to be 0.5. Now let's put this function. I am going to just cut this function, and put it below main. So let's see what happens when this is done. If the float function, float reciprocal float x, is located below this line, below this function call. I hope you are understanding. The definition of the function is given below the call. Let's try to save this and let's try to run it. And it gives error. It gives error. And the error, it says, is not able to run the program because the function reciprocal is not found. Strange, isn't it? Function reciprocal is given inside the program, but the problem is you have defined the function below main, then you must declare the function above main. So how do you declare the function? Simple. You just go on top of main and you paste only the first line. I have taken only the first line, float reciprocal float x, but I am going to end this with semicolon, saying that I am not interested in writing what reciprocal does. I am only announcing that reciprocal is a function which is located somewhere else. And now this line, which is called to the function, will properly locate reciprocal function and will run this particular function which is written below the call. Let's try to run it and prove, yes, this is the fact. Let's see. Now when I run the program, it is asking me to enter a float value again. If I enter 2 as the value, it's going to print 0.5. That proves that the program executes. Come again. Declaration of the function should be done above the call if definition of the function is done below the call. Correct? What if you would have written this entire function? This entire function was written above here, above the call, right? Then is declaration necessary? Obviously not, because now the entire definition is above this function call, then declaration is not necessary. Okay, let's see one more code here. You recall this int max function, which we saw, I think, in our third video, and everybody knows what max does, and it is an int function. It is returning an integer. So let's do the same procedure on this max function. I'm going to cut this. Just stay with this video, okay? Just stay with this video, and I'm telling you a very important fundamental about definition and declaration. Let's say I have written the same max function below the call. You note that call is located over here. Now, according to our discussion just a few minutes back, you would say that the max function is written below the call. So this program would not work and give an error. And to make it work, you should write this first line of the function above main. Just paste it and end it with semicolon, isn't it? but I am not going to do any declaration and I am going to run it. Let's see what happens when I run it. Oh, it runs. It has not given error this time. I hope you are following this video properly, and this runs and prints maximum of 4 numbers. What's going on? I said that if you define the function below the call, then you have to declare it above main. But there is a twist in this particular discussion. In C language, suppose you write a function which returns int. Note what max is returning. Max function is returning an int, and such functions which return int can be defined above or below. Rather, you can define such functions anywhere, and C language will not have any complaint in locating such functions. So int are favorites of C, and functions which return int can be defined below the call, but you don't have to define it above the call. What if the same max function was a float function? It returns a float, and if you have defined this function below the call, then you will have to declare it above main. One more thing before we stop this discussion is that, let's say I write this max function as max. Note something is missing here, isn't it? Return type is missing. Actually, max returns an int, so we should write int max, int x, int y. We know that, but I have just omitted, I have just removed the return type of max, and it still works. So the core of the discussion is that if you write a function without return type, then C assumes that the return type is int. Return type is int. Great, isn't it? Int is really favorite data type of C language, it seems. So if I run this code, you note that it runs. Although I have not given the return type of the function, and I am entering 4 values, and this will print 5, the largest of the 4 numbers. So coming back to our slides, and what you have understood is when to declare a function. Function declaration is necessary if you define the function below the call. If you write this function below the call, then you have to declare the function above the call. Secondly, if the function returns int, then such function can be defined above or below the call. But but declaration is not necessary. Declaration is not necessary. All right. I have been repeating. I know few sentences I repeat every now and then, and it might be it might not be sounding. It does not sound very nice. Many times it is irritating. I repeat few sentences, but such questions are favorites in competitive exams or even to crack interviews. Suddenly you will see a function like max which does not have any return type. So you should understand that the function returns an int, and suddenly you will see a function defined below, but the declaration is missing above. You should not get confused. You should say, okay, this is an int function, and int function does not need any declaration. Thank you.